So, welcome to Internet of the Mind podcast. We're just going to spend a little time talking to my friend Phineas about a program called Adult Children of Alcoholics, and it's also now, since its inception, has become adult children of alcoholics and other dysfunctional families. And some of them go by the acronym ACA, and some of them go by the acronym ACOA, which is a different program. I'll let Phin talk about that a little bit. But then there's also ACDF, is Adult Children of Dysfunctional Families, and it's same background and structure and so forth. But um, I'll let Phin talk more about the boundaries between all that and everything too. So, Phineas, you want to just take it away?
My name is Phin. I'm an adult child, so let me identify right off the bat. I say adult child. I could definitely say I'm an adult child of an alcoholic because my father was an alcoholic. But one thing that this particular fellowship stresses is it is open to people who have dysfunctional family backgrounds that do not include alcohol. And it was discovered very early in the history of the fellowship that there were lots of people in other types of families who could qualify. And in the literature, the main fellowship text is called Adult Children of Alcoholics. It's what we call the Big Red Book because it is big and it is red. But you will find, if you look in that book, you will find a list of types of families in which a person could identify with the traits that adult children in these kinds of families grow up with. So, there's a list like if you had a parent with mental illness, which my mother most definitely did, even though she was not diagnosed. I mean, certainly these days she would have been definitely depression, probably some kind of OCD. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, but, there was a certain amount of what we would call religious abuse, which I didn't really understand until I got into the program. My father, was also a gambler. There was also some infidelity. So there's a whole cluster of things that make me an adult child, and I just prefer to call myself an adult child. So I've been in, because the basic idea in the fellowship is because we grow up in this kind of household, and because we're children as it's happening to us, we develop certain traits, and the child within us doesn't really develop the way a child is meant to develop. And so we say, and I'll probably talk about more of this later, that the solution to our problem is getting in touch with our inner child, where the way that I think of it is, basically it got frozen in a certain place and it developed a certain way, and we have to go back and almost reparent ourselves and kind of bring up that part of us that's still little, the way that it should have been done. So that's the basic idea of this program. I came into the program. I'm probably finishing my third year in the program. I wasn't actively looking for it. I was actually finishing my certification as a professional chaplain. And in my final certification interview with the panel, they challenged me that it seemed that I was always uncomfortable going deep with patients' feelings. And after that, they still certified me, but they encouraged me to explore that. And as I thought about it after the meeting, I thought, well, you know what? It probably comes from my child, because I really wasn't comfortable with, when my mother started having certain episodes, certain feelings, depressions, I really kind of avoided going deep with her. And I went online one day, and I was previously to this, I was part of 15, 20 years ago, I was a part of Adult Children of Alcoholics groups that were part of Al-Anon. So I should probably say that this particular fellowship I'm part of now is no longer part of Al-Anon. It grew out of Alateen, but early on they decided to form their own fellowship. And if Don's curious about that and wants me to go into it, I will. But that's part of the history. But I was part of those fellowships, And so when I was thinking about this, and I was just doing some research on 12-step groups in general, because I've been part of Overeaters Anonymous once, I was part of regular Al-Anon once. I put in adult children of alcoholics. And the website for this fellowship came up. It's adultchildren.org. Adult children is all one string, adultchildren.org. Go to that if you're curious. I encourage everyone who's listening, just to go and explore that. When you go to that, you will see what is called the laundry list. And the laundry list is 14 traits that kind of define who we are as adult children. And like I said, people from all kinds of dysfunctional family backgrounds can identify with those 14 traits. But that's basically, when I read those, I was like, yep, all 14. And so I'm like, all right, I would qualify for this program. And then I started reading some of the other literature, started getting an understanding of what it was all about. I discovered that, now this was post-COVID, so I discovered there were online meetings. And I thought, well, I can definitely, go to an online meeting. And I went to one the next day, and that is now my regular meeting. In time, I began I got what other 12 groups would call a sponsor. In this fellowship, you can call them a sponsor. My sponsor prefers the term fellow traveler, which some of them do, because we really don't. Adult children have problems with authority figures, and so the word sponsor sometimes brings that up. So some of us prefer to think of it that way. And I started working the 12 steps the ACA way, and I'm currently, I would say I'm about 7/8 through the 4th step, and it's taken me about 3 or 4 months. So,
oh, and that's one of the longest 4 steps in 12-step history, I think, too.
Yeah. But we take our time with it. Because as we say in the fellowship, we learn to reparent ourselves and recover with gentleness, humor, love, and respect. And a lot of the work, I should say that you can call my fellowship ACA or ACOA. I call it ACA because the Al-Anon still has adult children of alcoholics groups that they call ACOA. I like to call this fellowship ACA just to kind of distinguish it. It has several key differences in their 12-step fellowships. First of all, it has an open literature policy. So while we do have conference-approved literature, they do allow outside literature to be read during meetings, and that's for 2 reasons. First of all, as the movement was forming, the awareness of adult children of alcoholics issues became prominent in psychology in general. So there was, I can never pronounce her name, Janet Wotitz, I think is her name. She wrote a book called Adult Children of Alcoholics, which is kind of the first one I read years ago. Apparently, a lady named Claudia Black was writing things about it, and the early stages of the fellowship drew a lot on those psychological resources. And the Big Red Books, our main text, has a lot of psychological resources in it, so that kind of makes it unique. The second one has to do with the history of the fellowship. One of the co-founders we refer to as Tony A. Tony A was an AAer who started to realize that a lot of his issues stemmed from his childhood because his father was a drinker. And he started talking about this in his sharings in AA. At the same time, there were Alateen members who became adults, and they still wanted to meet together. And as they met together, they realized that they now had certain issues as adults that were common that they really couldn't talk about as being part of Alateen because, as we say, we consider ourselves adult children because the self-doubt and the sense of shame and abandonment we experienced as children, we carry into our adult interactions. And we have come to realize that it in a very strong way, influences, limits, and determines how we conduct ourselves as adults. So they started talking about those issues. Then they heard about Tony A, and they invited him. And even though there was this huge gap in ages, as Tony A says, they identified with each other immediately. And so they began meeting informally. And, the meetings kind of floundered. And so they suggested that Tony A invite in some other AAers who had similar issues, and he did. And then the movement started growing. And after a while, they realized, the sharings were chaotic, the fellowship was chaotic, and they turned to Tony to lay down some structure. And so one day, Tony at work in his office, he says, I don't even feel like it was me writing it, but he wrote out the 14 traits that we call the laundry list. It's called the laundry list because when he introduced it for the first time at the meeting and he read it down, one of the members said, "Wow, that's my laundry list." And the name is stuck. So that's why it's called that, just in case you're wondering, if anyone out there is wondering.
Yeah.
But Tony A would go on to then rewrite the 12 steps that he thought were most appropriate for adult children. And he revised a couple of them. There is a video. He presented this at a ACA annual business meeting. There is a video of that on YouTube where he discusses why he made the changes that he did. And that same year, he published a book called The Laundry List on his experience in the fellowship. And he does write about his 12 steps in that book. And because he did, it's copyrighted. And also the same year, in 91, the fellowship decided to compile their own text. It's really unknown why they didn't just adopt Tony A's steps right away. He wanted them to, but for some reason they didn't. They stuck with the standard 12 steps, but they kind of reinterpreted them through the lens of Tony A's 12 steps. Tony A died in 2004. In 2022, they decided that maybe they should adopt officially Tony A's 12 steps. By that time, he had died, and his widow refuses to allow them to be used. And since Tony A never wrote them down and handed them out to a meeting, they can't be used. So the steps are worked in a different way, even though it's the traditional language. The materials, and we have a whole workbook on the 12 steps. The materials are written with the spirit of the modifications that Tony A put in. So, for example, when it comes to the 8th and 9th step, they don't push you to make amends with, like, your parents. They don't, even though we may have done some things to them that, we might consider wrong, they don't necessarily push you to make amends with dysfunctional people. So that's just one example of the difference. I don't know, Daniel, is that enough of an introduction to start?
Yeah, that's great. And, that last thing you said there, you can forgive a tiger for clawing you, but it wouldn't be very smart to get back in the cage with them. Right. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a great introduction. And I have a couple of questions along the way, but one of them is, if you could talk a little bit about, well, let me just introduce that, we both have counseling backgrounds, and I'm a therapist, and I've written some books on abandonment issues and shame and all the kind of things that happen with adult children of dysfunctional families and so forth. I call them less than nurturing families because I grew up in one. I love my family, and we had some great times together, but my family were wounded, and wounded people wound people, hurt people hurt people, encouraging people encourage people. So it's a process of growth, and we all go through it, and we all walk our own journey and so forth. But along my journey, I got into being a therapist because it did such wonderful things for me and helping straighten some things out in my mind and in my heart. But it was also through going to some 12-step fellowships of my own that, I got that background. But I do therapy, I do interactive groups, and I do individual sessions and all of that as part of my career, and I love it, and it's a privilege to be able to do that. But it's not the same thing as a 12-step group, especially with ACA or ACOA. There's a lot more structure to it, and it has good reasons for that. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, the difference and boundaries between an open group, an open discussion group, and ACA and that kind of thing. Yeah. Like the crosstalk.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, and why that is and how it fits.
All right. Yeah, I understand. Okay, so in a typical ACA meeting, all right, what Don's talking about is crosstalk. I'll go into that. Into that a bit.
Yeah, what can a newcomer expect when they walk into a meeting?
Okay. Well, let me first start off and say there are hundreds of different types of meetings. So I can talk about my experience with my type of meeting, but I can't say that this would be typical. But there are certain characteristics, certain guidelines that we follow. So, you go to an ACA meeting, you don't have to identify as adult child in an open meeting. So, for example, if you go to adultchildren.org and you go to the meeting section and you do a search, and if you see a meeting that says open, that means anybody, whether you think you have these issues or not, can join. And if it says closed, it means that you need to be able to say, I'm an adult child of a dysfunctional family. That's the difference. My meeting is open, so when I'm during the course of my meeting, people will come in. Well, there's a time when first timers are allowed to introduce themselves. Well, I'm here. I'm not sure this is a group for me, but I'm checking out. That's fine in an open group. Like I said, not fine in a closed group. The way my meeting format works is, now there's different types of meetings. So there are some types of meetings where you read out of the big red book. There's meetings where you were working through the steps book. So there's step meetings. There's just discussion meetings when the leader will throw out a topic. But whatever the meeting, when the person is sharing, okay, we do not crosstalk during that share or for the rest of the meeting. Cross-talking is responding to, referring to, commenting on, or in any way acknowledging what a person is sharing, positively or negatively. The reason for that is, as adult children in our homes, we were not allowed to express exactly what we felt, exactly the way we were feeling it. And we were not allowed to say certain things. I mean, I certainly had that experience growing up. Mom, there's something wrong with, the way this is happening. Oh, no, Phin, you don't understand. You're wrong about this. You're not seeing it right. You don't understand, this types of things. Your dad does.
Yeah, like a denial of their
Yes.
reality.
Yes,
Yeah, it's
exactly.
like little Sally gets up in the morning and comes through the living room and sees Dad passed out on the sofa with beer cans all over the place and like he's been throwing up. And she walks into the kitchen and says to Mom, "Is Daddy drunk again?" And Mom turns around and slaps her and says, "Don't you ever say that again. Your father's
Right.
sick this morning. He's got the
Right.
flu." So that child gets very confused by those kind of reactions because they really need to have a grasp on reality. So that's one of the big things, isn't it? That denial of
Yeah,
reality
and what we do as children is, well, we learn then not to say those things. Not
Mhm.
to say those things, not to
Yeah.
point out. I mean, one of the things, I've said in my sessions, in meetings and sessions with, is I knew something was messed up when I was a kid. I knew it. But anytime I said it, I was told that I was not feeling appropriately about it. It was put back on me that I was responding wrong. So after a while, you start to believe that you're wrong. And even if you don't believe you're wrong, you depend on these people for your
Mm.
livelihood, so you can't challenge them. So the
Yeah.
fellowship says we learn three things: don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. In order for us to survive our dysfunctional family households, we avoided those three things. So,
Mhm.
if I feel like Dad doesn't really love me because of what he says to me, and my mother says, "Oh, but Daddy does love you," after a while, I don't feel that rejection anymore. I just stop feeling it. When I know that I say something to Mom and Mom uses that in some way to hurt me, then I don't trust her. You know. So don't trust, don't talk, don't feel. So when we share in ACA, we allow each other to share exactly what we need to say. And we also, I don't even nod when somebody else is sharing, because if another member sees me saying, affirming somebody, they may feel like I'm rejecting them because I'm not nodding when they share. And of course,
So this wouldn't be appropriate at the meeting then, right? The thumbs
um,
up.
you're not supposed to do it. Of course, you can't control what people do.
Yeah.
Sometimes they clap and they do this
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that, but no, you were not supposed to do that. And it's not because you don't want to, it's not because you don't want to
Yeah.
affirm people. It's because, you don't want to start, um, you don't want to start any kind of idea that, one member is, one type of sharing is better than another.
Exactly. And that's what I see from my side as a therapist is, well, let me just give you a little history on that. And, the first 12-step group was AA, and that was back in the 30s. They didn't have group therapy until much later than that. And it came out of the study of how AA was so successful at helping people get sober. How did that work? They started looking at the group dynamics, and they ended up starting their own group therapy in psychological arenas, right? And so family therapy, group therapy, all of that stuff came out of this 12-step movement. But when they did that and they opened it up for discussion and facilitated by a professional and so forth, and certain things would get said and trigger somebody in the group, and either negatively or positively, like say, and then if nobody's there to help them process what just got triggered, it could not be pretty, right? And so keeping that structure of, no crosstalk and no affirmation, it's kind of difficult because we do want to validate each other's feelings, but we don't want to open it up for something that could get so cathartic that somebody could end up, pouring out a lot more than they wanted to. So I like the structure that way, and it's got its purpose, and group therapy's got its purpose, but there's a difference between the two for that reason.
And we also, if someone starts like crying, getting emotional, part of the guidelines is we don't try to fix each other. If a person needs to cry, they need to cry, because part of the ACA experience is allowing ourselves to feel the grief. We have to get in touch, because we lost something growing up. We know that we lost love, nurture, support, whatever it is. And one of the most difficult things, as we say in the preamble to the meetings, this is not an easy program, and it is not, because you start allowing yourself to feel what you didn't dare let yourself feel when you were a kid.
Right.
And there's a lot of grief. My parents are both dead, and I'm coming into all this awareness, and I've had experiences of grief that, because of this program, I could probably say certain things to them in a certain way, but I can't any longer. And I couldn't back then, and boy, if I could have. And those are all, and nobody tries to say, oh no, Phin, don't feel that way, put it in the past. We don't do that. We allow each other to feel our feelings. And we allow ourselves to express our truth as it is true for us. Now, so that's the crosstalk thing. Let me also add that the reason why my previous experiences in the other groups bombed out for me, because there was crosstalk. In both of those groups, in one group I was just accosted during a meeting because of what I shared, and I was new. I had no idea. And then, in the second group, it was friendly crosstalk, but it became so chaotic, and you get off on these tangents. So in this meeting, you can share what you want for a certain limited amount of time. In our group, it's 3.5 minutes. You get 3.5 minutes to say what you want, and then you move on. And that's true. Like if you go to a Big Red Book meeting, they'll read a passage, open it up for sharing. When everyone's done, you each get a certain amount of time. You might read another passage and do it again. So some groups want you to share just once before anybody else does, and some will allow you to share. Depends on the format of the meeting, but the basic idea of a meeting is this is a place where we as adult children get to express what we need to express. And so was that what you were asking about? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So I want to thank you for that sketch, that thumbnail sketch of what it is. It's very detailed, and hopefully that's going to help some other people. And there are a lot of ACA and ACOA and different 12-step groups around the country and so forth. And I just want to encourage anybody who can relate to some of the things you're hearing here today to consider going to one. They I suggest go to 6 in a row
Yeah,
consecutively
yeah.
to get a real good feel for the group. But and to say consecutively, that's an old Al-Anon trick, I think, is if you miss one, then you got to start over.
Well, I don't know.
So,
Yeah.
but you get a good sense. Yeah, you get a
Yeah.
good sense if you go, and that's just a rule of thumb. Go to half a dozen meetings and find the one that really feels like home for you or feels like it'll fit for you, because it might bomb for one of them might bomb for you, but be good for someone else, and so forth. And so groups end up having their own complexion, so to speak.
And there's so many,
And
there's so many different types, I should say, that, there's,
yeah,
like I encourage people to go and look at the, on the meeting list online, whether you're interested, because you'll see there's groups for the secular agnostic folks. There's group for
yeah,
Black, Indigenous, people of color. There's women only. There's men only. There's LGBT ones. But there's some groups that meet every day with a different format. I have not enjoyed every group I've gone into.
right.
Like Don said, you have to find one that's comfortable, but because there's so many online, you can
Hmm.
also do this from where you're at. The structure of ACA is meant to be a safe space, where because we've been prohibited from expressing ourselves and feeling and all that, it's meant to be a safe space where you can do that and have people. To me, the main benefit of ACA is very simple. These people understand what I'm saying. They're not saying
Yeah,
it's you. They're not saying you're not feeling the right way. They look, whether they're nodding or not, they know exactly what
yeah,
you mean. And that was the
right.
lifesaver for me. So,
Yeah. So, if I could talk a little bit about the Recovery Center now and how it fits with our discussion today, this is one of hopefully many different opportunities for recovery that we attract here to the Recovery Center, and we want to keep that open for people to find a way in. There are sessions online and so forth, but I think Phin, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about it in a minute. But you're going to start an ACA group here in the Recovery Center, and just want to mention too, though, that even though there's all that structure during the meeting in the Recovery Center, there's some other perks. Like this room right here is where a fellow traveler could sit down with their partner and they can have an open discussion about where they're at in recovery and what steps they're working on, and they can have a little online session without spreading out your contact information and so forth with people, but you can still have that intimacy and the ability to share and talk openly with somebody that you trust and you met at the meetings and so forth. And then there's the coffee bar, which is a place for smaller groups before the meeting or after the meeting or some other time. You want to arrange time to just have an open discussion about water cooler stuff. It could be about recovery. It might be about having fun in recovery. It might just be socializing, but there's that opportunity as well. But if anyone's out there listening that would like to have an opportunity to bring a 12-step or another, like Smart Recovery or some other kind of a community support group that would fit with adult children themes or codependency or Al-Anon or AA, and you want to bring that structure here, we have the rooms, we have the facilities. You bring the structure, and I'll help you if as much as I can if you need help in getting set up in the rooms and all that. But I'm hoping that the recovery center will fill some gaps. There's some terrible gaps in services and so forth, and when you do find them, they're very expensive. And so I just want to have a community space online here where we can fill in some of those gaps, and people can come and find something 24/7. Even it could be 24/7. It'd be late at night or whatever. But anyway, the recovery center is here for that. And Phin, you've been working with it a little bit, and you're hoping to set up or planning to set up your ACA meeting very soon, hopefully. And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
yeah. So first of all, just let me say, in terms of the recovery center's promise, um, is this.
Yeah.
Even though I have an online Zoom meeting, one of the big difficulties with online meetings is this. If I went to an in-person meeting, like I said, we don't comment on each other's shares during the meeting, but a person may want to be able to ask questions. And so in a normal face-to-face meeting, you might go out with a person and have a cup of coffee. A few of you might go out. The part of the ACA program is establishing relationships outside of the meetings. But in the online world, there's a couple problems with that. First of all, while in a face-to-face meeting, because that person's in your community, you may know them, you may feel okay sharing your phone number, you don't necessarily feel comfortable doing that online. So, part of the ACA literature says, use the telephone, reach out. Well, that's kind of difficult. Now, in this kind of a setting, for example, if I'm in a meeting, a Zoom meeting, and I'm, my group, after the meeting is over, we stay for a few minutes to answer questions. I could easily say with this recovery center, well, you know what? I have a place where we can go, and if you email me, I'll give you a link to get there. And I can do that with a smaller group too. And even after the formal meetings that we have here, there are opportunities to do that. So that's a real promise of this kind of a setup. So in terms of the meeting I'd like to start, I'm pretty much going to stick to the meeting format I have, except the fellowship has just about 2 months ago, I've talked about the Big Red Book. And like I said, the Big Red Book is big, it is red, it is daunting. But they just published 2 months ago a book called A New Hope. Oh, I probably should have gotten a picture of that I could share, but I don't. It's called A New Hope, and it is specifically for beginners. And so there are now groups using that text.
Awesome.
So
awesome.
I would like to start a group for beginners using that text. And of course, it would require participants buying the text. My Kindle edition costs $10. There's also I think a staple bound edition that's like $12 or $13. Not incredibly. It's certainly cheaper than the Big Red Book. And it really, I just started when I thought I would want to do that kind of meeting here. I actually got it and I started looking at it. It really has everything you need to know very briefly, very quickly for you to understand the basic ideas of the program, the laundry list traits, how we work the steps. Now it refers to Tony A's 12 steps, but it can't print them. But they are the steps are available everywhere on the internet, and I have a copy, and I can distribute it that way, without any problems. But it goes into sponsorship, and it goes into developing what we call your loving inner parent. So it's you get rid of your critical inner parent, which is the one that you were brought up with, the one that's in there that inhibits your inner child. You develop an inner loving parent that then nurtures your inner child. That's the whole idea with ACA. But and there's a whole loving parent workbook that's quite extensive. But the New Hope book goes over all that very simply. There are some simple exercises to do. And it also then gives you pointed recommended readings to follow up. So I'd like to use that text, for a group. The group I use, though, reads from the Strengthening My Recovery. That's our daily reader. That's 365 readings for every day of the year. I do like that, but I have a sense of when we go in the meeting, we read the meeting for that day. But there's a lot of topics we never get to because they don't fall on that calendar day. So I like to use the New Hope meeting, the New Hope text for that meeting, and so that would be a format where we would read some and opening up for sharing. It's also good, if the group I attend is about 20 people, so not everybody gets to share. But I've been in groups where there's 3-5 people, and that's not going to fill up an hour. But when you do a literature meeting, you read and people share for, like I said, 3 minutes, whatever. And if nobody has anything else to share, you read some more and you start over again. So that's what I'd like to do.
Great.
And I freed up some time to do that. and I'm hopeful that we can get something going there, and I can start next Friday actually.
Yeah,
So
great. So we'll put information. This video is going to be on the Internet of the Mind a blog post on the Internet of the Mind. There will be a comment section below, and I'm sure that we haven't answered everybody's questions about ACA. So if you have any questions, or like when is the next meeting, or where can I get into it, or anything about this particular topic, just make a comment below, and either I or Phin or both of us will respond to that when we get a chance. We're both kind of busy people too, but we can check in on it and answer any questions you might have. Also, if there are any helpers, whether you're a chaplain or a therapist or a coach or whatever, and you want to use some group rooms that we have here at the Recovery Center, just get in touch with me. If you're going to facilitate one of your own, I need to bring you up to speed and make you a moderator of the room so that you can open and close. You can have a lot more control over the cameras and the different things you can do. And one thing that we promise and ask here is that this session is being recorded, but there are no sessions allowed to be recorded without 100% consensus from all of the members. And with a 12-step group, I doubt you're ever going to get anything close to that. So, but with some of your other groups, you might, with support groups and all of that. So, yeah, any questions at all about how to use it or any of that, just make a comment below or email me at support@serenitycreationsonline.com. And Phin, do you have any contact info that you
I'm happy to share my email. That's phinmarr@gmail.com. That's PHIN as in Nancy, M as in Mary, ARR@gmail.com. Just go ahead and email me there. I'm also on Facebook under Phineas Marr. So, if you're on Facebook and you want to send me a message through Messenger, I'm open to that too. Like I said, with all the spam and with everything, I'm not comfortable with sharing my phone number, right out. Don, if I could, do you have time for me to share my screen for a moment?
Sure.
I did look up the New Hope. Let's see if I can do this. Now, I'm going to see if I can do the skills that Don. Share your screen.
So if you're going to share an image, you go to the share button there,
Do you see that?
Yes. Let me make it. You can make it bigger. I'm going to make it bigger here.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and do that.
That's what the text looks like. And you see that the stable bound is $17, but the Kindle price is $10. I believe both of those prices are probably cheaper than on ACA's site. But of course, you can buy an ebook or a paper book from there as well. That's under the literature link. Should I put that up too? Maybe you want me to share that screen?
Yeah. So you could do that, but I just made it presentation mode, and you can do that in any of the rooms here. And so if you scroll up on it, then you can see what you're sharing, and then if you scroll down, you still have the group there. But if you go back to if you go back to dynamic mode is what the other one's called. You can make it bigger and stretch it out. So I think we got a good look at it here. So
all right.
I appreciate you putting that up there, and that's awesome. I'm glad they're doing that because when you're coming in new, and especially with ACA issues, feeling a little insecure or not knowing exactly how to act or what to say or whatever, then that could keep a lot of people away.
Right.
Just know that if you have any questions, there are no mistakes. It's just that we all have to go through our own learning curve with all of this.
And we do understand. Those up in the fellowship understand that it's scary to do this because we were scared when we did it.
So I think that's about it that I want to cover today. I'm going to put this video up here shortly, Phin. I appreciate you coming and everything that you're doing, and I hope it's the start of more people coming along and doing some things like this.